Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and today on Retro Science Fiction and Horror Theater, I'm proud to bring you Brian Walker of Brian's Drive-In Theater. It's Brian's birthday today, so we are going to be celebrating with a tour of horror, well, birthday-themed horror, actually. So without further ado, greetings and welcome, Brian.
How are you tonight, Hercules?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Well, apparently I've made another revolution around the sun.
That's always a good thing.
Yeah, well, it's much better than not making another revolution around the sun. So yes, that's the way I'm trying to look at it. I'm 57 today.
I've heard people, instead of wishing people happy birthday, they say happy solar return. So I guess it's the same idea that you just shared.
Or 1 year closer to being dust again.
Okay. Well, this is a horror show, so
well, exactly. And horror films are all about everyone's fear of death, right?
It's in some form or fashion, yes.
Yes. So
safely.
And to tell you the truth, there's a huge list of birthday themed horror movies or horror movies that have some sort of plot motivation centered around a birthday, and you never would think so. I mean, the obvious ones jump out when I was trying to come up with a topic. Happy Birthday to Me, which is a movie that I saw in a grindhouse, but when it was new, I might have been like 15, 16 years old. It stars Melissa Sue Anderson and Glenn Ford and Sharon Acker, so it's got respectable talent. I mean, it's clearly a B movie. But as you know, there's nothing wrong with that. So
no, nothing wrong at all.
It's a really interesting movie, and it doesn't have the cult following that I think maybe it should have, because the director who directed it late in life, his name is J. Lee Thompson. He did some pretty impressive films prior to Happy Birthday to Me. If you ever recall seeing the reincarnation of Peter Proud.
Yes, I remember that.
Which is a respectably good movie, right? He did 2 of the sequels to Planet of the Apes in the early 70s. Did a ton of Westerns that you would, the names of which you would probably recognize. So the movie it's directed well. I mean, and it's shot well. Everything's laid out properly. The suspense could be a little better, perhaps, but it is suitably gory. And I do have fond memories of seeing it when I was, a teenager. When I was raiding our video vault for tonight's podcast, it was one of the films that we have on hard copy on DVD, but it's a copy that we purchased. For a lot of the rest of these are copies that Greg ripped like 15 or 20 years ago. They're on DVD, and thank goodness he did, because otherwise I would have had a tougher time doing research for this one. I kind of jumped ahead of myself there, but I did want to
sneak in.
Well, and that's an easy one too. Like I said, Happy Birthday to Me. But there are other films that you might not think of as being birthday horror at first, but they actually are. And I'm going to go back to an early birthday horror movie, which is The Birds. Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. He's the director that every horror film director wants to be. Let's face it.
I've heard that said.
I mean, everybody wants to be Brian De Palma. I mean, everybody cites Hitchcock. Even Rob Zombie. Everybody cites Hitchcock as an influence, and he'd almost have to be an influence, because his films have just kind of permeated American culture, and thankfully at that, because he made some really effective horror films that even 60, 70 years later stand the test of time. They're still suspenseful, they're still good, and there's not really much to date them, which I think is the hallmark of a great film. If an 80-year-old film can still captivate modern audiences, that's just a good movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's some obvious ones there, like Casablanca. I mean, that film, it's just never going to leave the canon. I mean, and it's a good movie. You know, I've probably seen it, I don't know, 10, 12 times. And it's a fun movie. I love Humphrey Bogart's performance in it, but you know, I mean, there's just something about it that you know, kind of reaches through time. And you know, Alfred Hitchcock's films are like that. And The Birds, gosh, he made some pretty gory movies, but that one's perhaps the goriest. You can see, you know, some blood in scenes, and that wasn't, you know, Hitchcock always you know, played his cards pretty close to the vest on that. He didn't show a lot of gore, but you started seeing it really creep in with The Birds. Now later on, he would make incredibly disturbing films like Frenzy, that my parents kind of ill-advised took me to see at the drive-in. And I can remember, you know, my eyes just sort of bugging out that movie's kind of, you know, I mean, it's a little intense for a 7-year-old. Let's put it that way.
I don't remember Frenzy as well as The Birds. The Birds, I have very vivid recollections. I'm sure I've seen Frenzy, but I don't remember it.
I mean, I've seen The Birds more times than I have seen Frenzy, but I got to say, Frenzy made a pretty big impact on me the first time I saw it. I mean, it really freaked me out. You know, of course, The Birds, you know, freaks you out too. What better thing to be afraid of than something you would never consider to be a problem? Just little birds that people feed. Yeah, that people feed, that people, you know, purchase in pet stores, or used to purchase, I should say, in pet stores. And you know, there is the birthday scene where Kathy, Angela Cartwright, and she's the younger sister of Rod Taylor, and they have an outdoor birthday. The birds come in, start pecking. And that's kind of why I included it, because you know, it is kind of a pivotal scene, and it's the it's the scene that lets the viewer know that this is an epidemic. You know, this is going to only get worse from here, and really builds up. You know, and it's the scene, you know, before the schoolhouse scene, which is brilliantly shot. Both scenes really are. So.
Yeah, I can see that being a very memorable birthday.
Yes, when birds
experience vicariously.
Yeah, when birds swoop, you know, down out of the sky and try to kill you. It's yeah, you're not having a good day. Let's put it that way.
Well, it's started to a whole trend of people being afraid of things, like you pointed out with the birdies. People associate them like with innocuous, innocent type of things. And there were a string of movies over the years where they would take something that you'd never think would be the subject of a horror movie, and then that would be what was out to get you.
Well, if you look at, you know, the timeline of horror films, you early on, and there's some of my favorite ones, so I'm not knocking them. The Universal horror films are all monsters, you know, things that don't occur. You like you know, nutcase doctors sewing bodies together and then making them live again, or vampires from Eastern Europe, or the Wolf Man, or the creature from the Black Lagoon. I mean, you know, the Invisible Man, Invisible Woman. I mean, they're all kind of, they're fantasy, you know. Now they're based on, most of them are based on, you know, great works of literature. Bram Stoker's Dracula, I think, is really an overlooked novel, you know, from the late 19th, early part of the 20th century. I think it's really well done.
I think so too.
And it's a piece of literature that I think you can still introduce to a modern audience. But there again, you know, we have fears that these movies kind of generated were based on monsters, you know, things that weren't likely to happen. You see where I'm going with this? You know, and after World War II, when we actually had seen some horrors that are way worse than Bela Lugosi in a cape, that kind of changed where horror went. And I think that's when you started seeing horror movies based on um, a situation that's supposed to be good and suddenly goes very, very bad. And those are really effective horror films, if you think about
Yes.
it, because it kind of leads you down the garden path, a little bit, especially in the beginning of it, before the blood and the scares start rolling out. And psychological horror is always fun, and something you really didn't see until after World War II. I mean, for the most part. The next movie I wanted to talk about is an old favorite of mine, a film that I there again saw at a drive-in when I was a kid, called Frogs. I'm a big Ray Milland fan.
Uh-huh.
He was a really good actor, I think, but he had to make a living, he had to survive, and he rolled with the punches and took. He was in big pictures in the 40s, like Lost Weekend, which is a brilliant performance. I don't know if you've ever seen that before. He's an alcoholic in the movie, and had been in real life for a while as well. He cleaned up though, and was one of the first actors to publicly admit that he'd had a problem.
Lugosi did the same, didn't he too? That he had a substance abuse problem. He was
He
pretty
probably was, other than some silent actors like Alma Rubens or somebody like that. Lugosi really was a trailblazer on that. I mean, I will say this: he probably didn't have anything to lose at that point, but admitting that in the mid 50s to the press had to have been really tough. I mean, that had to have been hard. But that was also part of the recovery process, is to say, yes, I had a problem. So that makes you think a lot more of Bela Lugosi.
Yes, it does.
And I know we're not talking about him, but we are talking about horror films. But he in some ways he's kind of a tragic figure, and I don't think he deserved what happened to him in the end. He was enormously talented. I think he was a very good actor, and yes, he was in some schlock, but it was going to be watchable because he was in it. And if you can carry a picture, hey, you're something. And Ray Milland, there again, a working actor, even into his 60s and 70s, worked regularly. And he's the star of this movie, and it's his birthday in the movie, and that's sort of the impetus behind all of the fun in the club. And it's got a fantastic cast too. Lynn Borden, who was on the last season of Hazel as the mom, is in it, and she's got a pretty juicy role. She gets to be really hateful. Those are always fun to watch. Just if somebody gets a role where they can be nice and nasty, if they grow fangs, if they pick it up and run with it like she does, and it's lots of fun. Judy Pace, who was an actress you used to see a lot in the 70s. Sam Elliott, who is still out there in films, in his late 70s.
Wow.
And Joan Van Ark from Temperatures Rising and Knots Landing is in it as well. And if you look at the cast list, those are the people I've picked out. There's way more recognizable good character actors in the movie. In that I know that you don't watch Svengoolie on MeTV, but Svengoolie runs Frogs fairly frequently.
I remember the poster. I could see it very vividly. Yeah. The hand coming out of the poster, the frog's mouth. I don't recall much of the movie, but I remember seeing it, and the poster's what convinced me to go see it.
Well, like I said, it's a fun movie, and it's a movie where the killer is something you would never worry about, a harmless little frog, and that's another thing that makes this movie fun. And like I said, there are a few over the top performances in it, but hey, it was a B movie, and sometimes you need you need to go over the top to sell it. And Ray Milland is incredibly crusty this, but that's his wheelhouse too. I mean, he's good. He is. He's good at being that Doubting Thomas and the grumpy old patriarch. But as we move into the 70s and you find more and more birthday horror films, and I found this great listing just running the search a few days ago. It's a compendium on IMDb, the Internet Movie Database, of birthday horror films. I just kind of stumbled upon it just a few days ago. And it had a lot of newer stuff on it that I'm not so familiar with. And I was just intrigued to see how this had snowballed, over the years, how many movies do, have a birthday, how many horror movies, I should say, have a birthday element to them. And the next movie I want to talk about is one I've had on tonight here at the house. Thanks to Greg for ripping it about 16 or 17 years ago. Because,
thank you, Greg.
Yes, well, like I said, he's not with us tonight, but he had, I think it's probably from Turner or something like that. So it's Sisters. It's one of Brian De Palma's first feature-length films, and his first real horror film. And it's fantastic for a lot of different reasons. For one thing, I know that Brian De Palma has been accused of being sexist, and you find those trappings a lot in horror films. I agree. It's far too many female victims. I mean, I get it. On the other hand, I think he does psychological thrillers really well. And sometimes he does have a female protagonist, so maybe he did grow during his career. And he was once married to Nancy Allen, who was in some of his movies like Dress to Kill and Blowout.
I remember
And
that.
she's in too. She's in Carrie. I completely forgot about that, but she's in Carrie. And it's great. She's horrible in Carrie. She's nasty, and it's like I said, it's one of those great roles that you could really sink your teeth into. But in Sisters, so with Brian De Palma's, one of his first feature-length films, Margot Kidder is the star, and you know what? She's somebody I think has really been underrated over the years. She's in some great B movies, some of my favorite B movies, and she was in some good A pictures too. And she's excellent in this. She has to carry a lot of the picture herself. And without giving too many spoilers, it's called Sisters because she was born, what we used to call as a Siamese twin. She was a conjoined twin, and has the scar to prove it. And Jennifer Salt, who the former actress turned producer, most people would probably remember her from the late 1970s ABC sitcom Soap.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, she was in some other movies as well, and she did a lot of 70s grindhouse horror films. She's in Gargoyles with Cornell Wilde.
Oh wow.
She's Cornell Wilde's daughter in the movie. So Jennifer Salt's got a good rep, for these 70s horror films that I love. Charles Jerning's in it as well, and it's another one of those films that has a really solid cast. You can see where he spent the money on screen. He spent the money on the talent, which I think serves any director well.
Money well spent.
Yeah, but you can have cardboard sets, but you got to have actors who can turn out a performance, or else your movie's sinking. Unless it's so bad it's good, and even at that, it'll take it 50 years to get recognized, right?
Like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Or for Forbidden Zone.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Anyway, Brian De Palma's movies I kind of grew up on in the 1970s. I can now this is one Sisters is one I didn't get to see until later. But it's a really good psychological thriller. And Jennifer Salt is there again, just a fantastic actress, does a really good job in it. And just a fun movie to watch, really. I can remember seeing some of his later films in the theater. What I remember seeing vividly was Dressed to Kill with Angie Dickinson.
Hmm.
Have you ever seen that?
Yes, my cousin and I, there were three theaters in our area, so we caught a lot of these films. Unfortunately, I don't remember very much except for the posters and for flashes of scenes. But you're taking me down you're taking me on a stroll down memory lane of this of the 70s. I remember seeing all those movies.
Well, I like I said, I vividly remember seeing this in the theater. Fortunately, it was in one of the better theaters that we had in our town at the time. Some of these movies I saw in the really, really bad cheap theater that we had
Hmm.
in town, which sadly was raised many, many years ago, probably in the 80s, probably late 80s, I would say. It was a theater built, I'm guessing, in the 1930s and hadn't been cleaned since then.
Hmm.
But you could see two movies for like a buck, and they were usually interesting horror films. So they ran a lot of horror, a lot of sci-fi. Sometimes they do some comedies that were pretty good. But anyway, I remember seeing Dressed to Kill really vividly because I loved Angie Dickinson. She was on Police Woman in the 70s.
Hmm.
She'd been in a lot of films. She was essentially she and Shirley MacLaine were essentially female rat packers. And could hold their own with Frank Sinatra. You know, kind of interesting, strong women. And for example, I mean, she was policewoman on TV in the 70s. I mean, that's kind of a progressive for television in the 70s. That's really progressive. And Jessica Walter had a show on too, which I think was called Amy Prentice, but I think it only lasted a season, and it was contemporary with policewoman. But this movie is really interesting, and I think more of Brian De Palma's movies a little more Hitchcockian than some of the others. It's got a lot. I see a lot of Dial M for Murder in it. It's got good suspense. Um, it's hard to talk around it without giving the plot away. You know what I mean?
Well, you could say spoiler alert and give away.
Well, but if somebody hasn't seen it, I don't want to ruin it for them, because the suspense is the whole reason to watch it.
That is true.
And some excellent performances. Michael Caine, and Nancy Allen, another horror actress that I think was vastly underrated, is in it. I think she does a really good job in horror films, in other films too. But I think her genre really was horror. And like I said, she was briefly married to Brian De Palma, and I could see, it's a shame that the two of them didn't go on longer, because I kind of miss seeing Nancy Allen in some of those horror films. But anyway, that was a stroll away from birthday horror. Sorry for that. If you fast forward to the 80s, a lot more birthday themed horror movies pop up. We already talked about Happy Birthday to Me, which I saw in that dirty 1930s grindhouse for probably a buck. But I also saw another one the same year, came out the same year, called Bloody Birthday.
I remember that too. The poster mostly, but I remember seeing that.
Well, and another film with a great cast. Susan Strasberg, Lee Strasberg's daughter. The famed, at the Actors Studio, the premier acting teacher. Yeah, his daughter was in this cheap B movie. No, as an actress, she was fine, and she actually did several horror films throughout her career, and always delivered a good performance. The thing I like about this movie is that it revolves around the birthday of three children that were born during an eclipse. And there's just something amiss about these three children. It's a little girl and two little boys. And the day they turn 10 years old, they start going on a killing spree. And I won't ruin it any more than that.
Okay.
Okay, but that's essentially the plot of the film. So you have these horrible little monsters, running around trying to kill people. But it's such a fun movie to watch. These aren't just stab you and you're dead. I mean, these murders are orchestrated, and that's part of the fun of watching it. Other cast members to look out for in this movie are Julie Brown. She does a lot of she's done a lot of parodies. A well-known comedian. Homecoming Queen's Got a Gun singer. Just Say Julie, which was on MTV back in the 80s. I think a movie that we've talked about, a parody that she did in the early 90s of Madonna's Truth or Dare, was called Medusa Dare to Be Truthful.
Yes.
If it is out there somewhere on YouTube or Amazon Prime, I don't know if it is, but watch it. It's hysterically funny. I think she's brilliant. Now in this movie, she's not funny. She is an actress just like anybody else in the film. And Joe Penny, who did a lot of TV back in the 80s and 90s, is also in Bloody Birthday. And the director is Ed Hunt, who's kind of a small-time director. Didn't really direct too many films. But the films that he did were largely exploitation movies. This movie, Bloody Birthday, is probably his best known, I would say. This is probably the zenith of his output. But there are a lot of people out there who like exploitation films too. Now those are separate and distinct from other cult movies. But some of these exploitation films have cults built around them. So
yes, they do.
Yeah. And also in 1981, a film that I have not seen, unfortunately, I don't believe. It just doesn't sound like I've seen it, but I'm trying to find a copy of it. It's called Madhouse. There again, also released in 1981. The stars Michael McCrae. And the plot line is this woman is trying to escape her homicidal twin sister. And their birthday is sort of the culmination of the action in the movie. Sounds really interesting. Have not seen it, to my recollection anyway. And I'm going to try to make it, my life's work to see it, I suppose. Well, now that I've read the description, I got to see it now. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
It sounds really interesting. I like the motivation for the plot in it. And twins pop up a lot in horror films.
In mythology too. Twins
Yes.
are like a fascinating thing, and they keep popping up in the myths. And even
Yes.
the Theban Hercules was a twin. He had a brother named Iphicles that you don't really hear much about.
I don't know if it's the good versus evil, kind of thing with twins. I'd say there's a lot, definitely a lot to that. When it comes to, at least in horror films, well, in Greek mythology too. But I like the description. I like the plot. It sounds really interesting. Would love to see it.
Yeah, the archives and YouTube seem like good places to start, and then it might be in one of those Mills collections, in one of those 50 or 100 film boxes.
Probably not. I would say this one is under some sort of copyright.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. A lot of those, 50 movie packs, all of those are public domain essentially.
Right.
But there again, something to look forward to. I'll stumble upon a copy of Madhouse at some point, or find it for download or Amazon Prime or something like that. I haven't had a chance to check to see if it's out there. I haven't even looked on YouTube.
Yeah, a quest for after the show, as you celebrate your birthday.
Exactly.
A present immediately. Yeah.
Now, two movies that I have seen a number of times. Child's Play, the original, from 1988. So it's soon to be 35 years old. Has a couple of actors from the state in which I now live. Brad Dourif and Chris Sarandon, both West Virginia natives. And both in this film. Catherine Hicks is in it. She is the single mother in the film. Dinah Manoff is also in it. She was on Soap along with Jennifer Salt, and she's the daughter of Lee. Oh gosh, I can't remember her mother's name now. She's still alive. She's in her 90s. Well, I'm going to have to look it up now. I keep wanting to say Lee Remick, and her name's not Lee Remick.
A bit of Child's Play trivia. I believe my sister, or one of my sisters, went to college with the person who came up with Chucky. And
Oh, really?
she was saying that for years beforehand, he had, like, he was drawing it out and telling people about the plot, and everybody thought he was nuts until they saw the movie come out. But he was preoccupied with that for years before it became an actuality.
Well, from what I read, he was preoccupied with the storyline, but he had not really committed anything to paper. And somebody gave him some money to make the film, and then he had to write the script. But you know what? That's probably the way most scripts are written anyway. It's, I've got 2 weeks to crank this thing out. That's how they get done.
Mm-hmm.
If you have unlimited time, you may never finish it. If you got 2 weeks, you're going to finish it.
Finish it. One way or
And
another.
quality considerations aside, you get to finish it. Jack Colvin's also in it. He was in The Night Stalker, that great, one season only TV show from the mid '70s. With Darren McGavin, yes. Anyway, Dinah Manoff's mother is Lee Grant, who is in, well, I don't know that she's still working, but she's actually still alive. She's in her late 90s. But well-known actress, very good actress. Well, as is her daughter, Dinah Manoff. The plot line in Child's Play is Catherine Hicks is a single mother, and she buys her son a doll, Chucky, for his birthday. But this particular doll that she buys her son is possessed by Brad Dourif's spirit, and he's a serial killer. So it's a lot of great late 80s fun. There's a huge cult built around Chucky.
Yes.
You can buy, Chucky dolls. How many sequels have they made, over the years?
Action figures, all sorts of merch.
Yes, tons of merchandise. You are right. And it's kind of it's one of the earlier horror films that did have that much really cool merchandise roll out from it. So that's kind of an interesting side to it. Now, another film that also fits the genre of horror birthdays is one that I saw on videotape, and I was dying to see it. Was at the video store the first day that it came out, so I had that brand new tape that nobody had ever watched before, and it's called Frankenhooker.
I remember that. I love that movie. That I remember. It's
Well, it kind of blew me away. I like the whole comedy, tongue-in-cheek horror film, from time to time, and it's really reminiscent of another one of my favorite old horror films called The Brain That Wouldn't Die.
Yes,
very reminiscent of it. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't doubt that the person who wrote the script had just watched The Brain That Wouldn't Die, because here's the plot line: a medical student loses his girlfriend in an accident. Now, in this case, in Frankenhooker, it was a lawnmower and not a car, but okay. But he saves her head, just like Jason Evers saves Virginia Leith's head in The Brain That Wouldn't Die. And then, just like Jason Evers did in The Brain That Wouldn't Die, he goes out into kind of the sleazy part of town looking for body parts for his girlfriend.
mm-hmm.
Just like The Brain That Wouldn't Die. It's just an update of the movie, and then it has the overtone of he does actually in Frankenhooker he does actually manage to compose a body. We never get quite that far in The Brain That Wouldn't Die. I think in The Brain That Wouldn't Die, Jason Evers' goal was just to have a complete body, and swap the heads. Whereas in Frankenhooker, she's made up of different parts, more like a traditional Frankenstein. But
Synchronistically, I picked up last time we were at the dollar store or $1.25 store now. I picked up an anthology of movies about brains, that are science fiction and horror related. So now I have to look and see if that movie's on there.
Oh, I'm sure it is. And Frankenhooker was shot in several boroughs in New York City and New Jersey. So it's kind of a fun movie to watch if you're nostalgic for late 80s, early 90s New York.
I haven't seen that on DVD. Has it come out on DVD? I used to have it on VHS once upon a time.
I do not know. I do not know if it's ever been out on DVD.
I will quest for that after tonight's show.
I don't know if we have a copy of it either. I didn't look.
Yeah, that was a great movie. It was a lot of fun, and Tim Burton's Frankenweenie was out around the same time. So I thought that these two movies would unleash a flood of bizarre Frankenstein movies, but alas, they did not.
No, and it's a shame. The video store. Okay, Frankenhooker is available on Prime Video.
Okay.
Starting for $2. There's a Blu-ray of it. For $18, and where I'm at, 2-day delivery. Yes, it is readily available. Golly, now I've got two things that I need to purchase. I haven't bought myself a birthday gift yet, so there I go.
There you go. And getting off the topic a little bit, Hercules Against Rome is finally available on YouTube.
Really?
Yes, I went on a quest to one of these oldies shops that has millions of items crammed into like a warehouse. So I went looking for it. They didn't have it and they couldn't find it. They said it wasn't anywhere. And then I went home and just typed it into YouTube, where I typed it in the day before and it wasn't there. And there it was. I think there were two different copies of it. So the universe heard me, and I'm planning on watching that this weekend.
Well, and as luck would have it, Madhouse, also from 1981, is available on Prime Video, and there is a 2-disc special edition Blu-ray available as well.
Oh, awesome.
So one more thing to add to my birthday card. Anyway, I do not see birthdays as being horrific things, because it's better to have a birthday at this age than not to have a birthday, as we mentioned earlier. But and to tell you the truth, privately, I had kind of a rough day. So
Sorry.
And traffic was, it was just everywhere I turned. Traffic was horrible. It's the second day of classes at a major university, so the Department of Highways decides to shut down traffic in order to do some maintenance.
Of course.
On one of the busiest stretches of road in this town. And I got caught up in that. I was late for an event that I was hosting earlier today. It was it was a rough one. I made it though. And these birthday horror films are a lot of fun. They really are.
Yes, they are. And again, a stroll down memory lane. And as you were describing the movies, I was remembering some of the ones that I had forgotten. Again, now I have to seek them out. We have a collection of Christmas horror, something we've covered on the show before. We have a whole bunch of that, some that are very obscure. One of them had Goldberg, the wrestler. And
yes. What is that one called? Santa Sleigh.
Santa Sleigh. And
that's a fun movie. I recommend that to anybody who wants to watch a horror film and Robert Culp's in it. It's got some really good actors.
And there are Mother's Day movies, where, like you said, something innocuous and normally you wouldn't distrust, where the mother is a rapacious murderer. Lloyd Kaufman made one of them, or bought one of them, and had it into the Trauma imprint.
Well, and John Waters too. I mean, he made Serial Mom,
Yes.
which is a fantastic movie. Probably his last great movie.
So what other days that people would normally feel good about it can be enhanced by adding horror elements? There's
Well, John Carpenter beat us all to it, but Halloween, I
of
mean,
course Halloween.
so many of us look forward to Halloween every year. For a lot of people, Halloween is the new Christmas, if you know what I mean. And it does sort of kick off that whole fall season, when it comes to getting together with family and friends. I don't think we're going to do it this year, but we used to have a huge Halloween party here.
You
And
used to
then,
make the house into a haunted house too. I remember you telling me.
well, actually the garage, but yes.
Garage.
And it's sort of the kickoff for the fall, and then you have Thanksgiving a few weeks later, and Christmas is about another month or so. I don't know, maybe 4th of July horror films, maybe that's something to look forward to, or Easter, perhaps.
Yeah, I can see Easter, especially with after Five Nights in Freddy's, where they have animatronics that are like cutesy animals that are very sinister. I can see like an Easter Bunny horror film.
Yeah, I could probably see that too. Now, there's other movies in this genre that I think are worth checking out for birthday horror films. There's one that I haven't seen for a long time. It's called American Gothic, and Yvonne DiCarlo. I'll watch anything that she's in, essentially. And she did some movies that may not have been great, but she was great in them, and she's in this. She and Rod Steiger are ma and pa, and you don't want to stop by their house. Let's put it that way. And it's got a great poster. He's got a pitchfork that's bloody, and she's got a knife, a giant knife that has blood dripping down. And then there's a bunch of kids in the window in the background. They look terrified. I like movies like that too, where people are traveling and they have to stop off, and they're out in the middle of nowhere. You find that in some of Rob Zombie's movies. House of a Thousand Corpses is built entirely around that, where you get and 2000 Maniacs also has a similar plot where travelers are being picked off one by one.
Yeah, there were a bunch of those for a while with getting stuck in the backwoods, and there were all sorts of radioactive mutant hillbillies or cannibal hillbillies.
The Hills Have Eyes, yes.
There were a lot of imitators to that. I remember watching a whole spate of them at one time.
I got to tell you, the first time I saw The Hills Had Eyes, it blew my mind. And that's another. We were talking about vacation horror films, 2 months prior to tonight, and that's another one of those situations where you have an idyllic, something that's supposed to be grand and wonderful, and goes south really fast. It's a good horror film motivation.
Yes, it is. And again, it takes something that you consider safe and turns it into something horrific and frightening.
Yes. And there again, still more 80s horror films with birthday themes. Slumber Party Massacre 2 is another one with Crystal Bernard from Wings. Jennifer Rhodes is in it. Let's see, Blood from the Mummy's Tomb. No, that's another one I have not seen. Let's see. Oh, and I haven't seen this movie either, but just a brief story. We were out for dinner with some friends a few nights ago, and I've got a Banana Splits t-shirt from when the image is, I was a big Banana Splits fan as a kid, the Hanna-Barbera late 60s television series. I don't know if you ever saw it or not.
Yes, I remember it.
Okay.
And we recently saw a horror film based on the Banana Splits.
Correct. And it also fits this genre. And it's a comedy horror film, from what I understand. And I don't have anything against it. I just haven't gotten to watch it yet. It does sound like an interesting thing where a family goes to this taping of the Banana Splits show, but
Mhm.
the characters go on this killing spree at the studio. I mean, if you think about it, it does sound pretty fun. And I like them. But anyway, I had the T-shirt on when we were out to dinner, and like 4 or 5 people at the restaurant commented on it. They were all in my age range, people who would recognize the Banana Splits. Everybody, and there's an odd affinity for people, let's say from 50 to 70 in that series. I get that out of all the crazy, I've got a lot of really cool T-shirts like the one I'm wearing tonight.
Uh-huh.
But out of all the ones that I have, that one probably generates the most comment from people our ages, essentially.
I must let you know that I don't usually like wearing T-shirts with something on it. I usually just don't, because I don't like feeling like an advertisement for somebody else's creative work. Just one of my peculiarities. But Athena got me some really cool Hercules T-shirts, and I'm wearing one today. So on your birthday, I decided to honor you by breaking with tradition and emulating you with your cool T-shirts.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, I don't, I don't want a corporate logo necessarily on my chest or back, unless it's something that I like. And what I'm wearing today is a T-shirt from a really great museum, the early Ford V8 Museum in Auburn, Indiana. I've been there several times. It's a pretty new museum. It's only been open for a few years. And it celebrates Ford V8s from 1932 to 1953, the old flathead V8 that Ford kind of, that engine essentially saved Ford from being consumed by General Motors. And it's a great museum. It's not for profit, so I can feel good about wearing this one.
And you've inspired me to. I don't know if it can be shown. Let's see. No. I'll send you. I'll have Athena take a picture. I'll send it to you. It's a Hercules gym.
Very good.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that whenever we travel, if I've enjoyed the area, I might buy the T-shirt. It's T-shirts don't take up a whole lot of room, and you just cram them. You just cram them into the closet and go on. It's they're kind of like salt and pepper shakers at this point.
So are there any other birthday horror movies or?
Oh gosh, a ton. The Banana Splits movie, which I've got to watch this one. I loved them when I was a kid. Fleagle, Snorky, Banjo, and the fourth one, I always forget his name. I always have to go look for it.
Well,
and I can't.
That was in my to sell pile. So if we haven't sold it, it's yours.
Oh, you actually had a copy of it?
Yeah, we had a copy of it and we watched it. We watch at night before going to bed. We watch movies or TV shows or whatever. So we had found that and we watched it because we were both fans of Banana Splits also. So it's like, ooh, look, and so after we watched this, like, are we going to watch this again? It's like, probably not. So we put it in the to sell pile. But if it's still there, if it hasn't gone like in a lot or something, I'll put it aside and mail it to you.
Well, thank you. I would appreciate that. More 70s and 80s movies that fit into this genre. It's a little bit of a stretch, but Last House on the Left.
I remember that. Yeah.
Which is a fantastic movie. I like the plot motivation too. These teenagers these female teenagers are going to a rock concert and they want to pick up some marijuana, and then they are kidnapped and brutalized.
A convicts, yes.
Yes, and it's directed by Wes Craven. another famed horror film director. It's interesting to go back and watch earlier films by directors that are now well
Mhm.
known for horror films,
Yes, it
and
is.
sometimes their product evolved, and sometimes it was they just kept making the same movie, essentially, or maybe they just tried to top themselves. But I do like Wes Craven's films, very much.
So do I.
And he was one of those directors that realized that you had to hire decent talent. And it had to be fairly well written too. The sets, so what? But you've got to hire the talent. You have to have somebody who knows what they're doing in order to sell a script like a horror film, which in horror films, they can be kind of fantastic. Some of the plot elements can be, a little difficult to believe unless you've got, a really good actor who can sell it.
I love his Friday the 13th with Freddy
Yes,
Krueger. That's one of my favorite series, and that varied in quality from movie to movie, but
they did.
collectively together, it was quite a concept.
Well, and the first one with Heather Langenkamp and John Saxon, Hope Lang, was in it. Great actress. And Robert Englund, of course, is Freddy Krueger. That was the one that a couple of the sequels were okay, but that one was really scary.
And he had the whole thing with Dream Warriors,
Yes.
which anticipated or popularized the whole concept of lucid dreaming. That was one of the first films I'd seen where, they had people aware that they were dreaming in a dream and taking control of the dream. And I don't know what I felt about the remake, though. Did you see the remake?
No, you know how I feel about remakes. The original is always the best, Herc.
Yeah, I agree here. It was a good movie, but it wasn't Friday the 13th.
Well, and the thing about remakes too is this, if a movie's been released on Blu-ray, it's probably going to look pretty good, right? Even if it is 40 years old, it's going to look pretty good. If it's been restored, if it's been remastered. So why remake it? Why not go in a different direction? Don't depend on everybody's recognition of the title of a character or a character's name. Make something new. There's already great copies of A Nightmare on Elm Street out there, and are you going to make it better? No.
They're going to make it slightly different. The remake that they had of Friday the 13th had a couple of twists in there that it was like, oh, okay, that's interesting how they changed that. And I won't spoil it for you in case you ever watch it one day.
Yeah. But like I said, I'm just not real big on remakes. I don't know that I've ever seen one where the movie improved. Usually it just turns into a parody after a while, or if there's a good enough copy of the original, why remake it? It's probably not going to improve.
Probably not. We're approaching the end of our hour. And do you want to do a part 2 on this?
You know what? I like to theme each month, and
Okay.
let me think about that, and we'll talk.
Okay, that is incredibly awesome. Again,
We're getting into fall, so I mean there's Halloween's coming up, so I don't know if I want to commit to birthdays.
okay. Are there any Thanksgiving horror movies where the turkey that we're gonna let go?
We looked it up last year, and
Yes, we did.
I think there are a few. I think they border on parody, which is fine. But there's nothing like the giant stacks of Christmas horror movies.
That's very true.
And oddly enough, most Christmas horror movies are incredibly watchable too. I mean, they're not just junk.
Well, our conversation today has inspired me. I want to make a horror movie now. take it off the place that had it on my bucket list and move it up 10 or 15 10 or 15 spaces. What last time I was going to make one, it was again the logistics of it were okay. Very limited budget. What do? We could do it in the woods. Okay. Do I know anybody who has a house in the woods? Actually, yeah, I do. Okay, so we have a house in the woods. So okay, what horrible things can happen in a house in the woods that haven't happened in a house in the woods, in another house in the woods movie? And you take it from there, and then you brainstorm with people, and before you know it, you have like a really intriguing type of concept. And of course, it has to be mythical in some way if I'm doing it. So I managed to throw on a thread there. And now, again, one of the bad things is that the roads that were there to grow in terms of career-wise are no longer there as clearly as they were before. But now there's new opportunities. There's a frontier of all sorts of communication, and people are shooting movies off their phones. Dr. Barbara Becker-Holstein made a number of movies that have been film festivals, and some have won awards off the concept of selfies. You know, she somehow managed to mix selfies together with a script or a suggestion of a script, and made films. So it's much more doable, and it's cheaper to do now.
That's true. You can shoot HD quality stuff on a cell phone. Yeah, you're right. You just need a hook. You just need that idea, and you need a bunch of friends who can hit their marks and read lines, and won't ask for much.
Well, yeah, it's a fun thing, and I remember before we started making money with the show and with the movie, most people would work for like the credit or for the experience. Like there's a lot of people who are creative and have technical skills, but they don't know what to shoot. They don't have really a story. So if you have a story, if you have a vision, people flock to that and offer their services for bits and pieces of it. And a lot of creative people are looking for something different to do between whatever it is that they normally do, to have something different. So yeah, it was just the intent to create a tribe, and the tribe eventually formed, and we had people. We were shooting like every day. There were so many shoots that I couldn't even attend them anymore. I had to like talk to people on the phone and look at the things that they sent to the editor and look at what was going on. So again, you've inspired me. Thank you for that.
I'm glad I could do that.
So how are you going to celebrate? You have 2 more hours until this day.
I've got to I have to teach tomorrow. I have to drive about 3 hours to another part of the state to work all weekend.
Oh.
So not all weekend, but tomorrow and Saturday. So I got kind of a busy day, busy weekend lined up. Really, we'll get back on Sunday.
Well, thank you for taking some time out from all the stuff you're doing, and hopefully Sunday you'll be able to celebrate. And I will, as soon as we get off, I'm going to ask Athena to look through the DVD, so hopefully we can find Banana Bunch.
No, not Banana Bunch. Banana Splits.
Banana Splits, yeah, Banana Splits.
All right, sounds great.
It's been a while. How can people reach you? How can they get to the drive-in theater and all the other places where you show movies, and be part of this awesome world that you opened up over 20 years ago, and it's still open?
Well, if you go to briansdrive-in-theater.com, you can peruse the site. It is still undergoing a massive update, but I'm getting closer and closer to my goal of having it all done. I probably have, I'd say about 80% of it done. There's still some areas where I need to spend some more time on it, but on most of the actor pages, there is something there to watch. I feature trailers, complete movies where that's possible, and also television performances for some actors. Of the three, those are the hardest to find. But some actors will have some TV performances. And we also have Movie of the Day every day, Brian's Drive-In Theater, which I promote through my Facebook channel. And if you go to Facebook and type in Brian's Drive-In Theater, it will take you to my place.
Yes, it will. And if you're looking for that hard to find movie that Brian talks about, there's a link where you can obtain it. And that's an awesome feature as well. Thank you so very much, Brian.
Thank
May
you.
the rest of your week pass quickly and uneventfully and with minimal stress. And
Doubt it.
I hope that Sunday makes up for the days getting there.
Oh, it'll be fine. I'll live through it.
And thanks to everybody who's tuned in. If all goes well, this will be up by midnight tonight. If not, it'll be out sometime tomorrow. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, this is us wishing you joyous journeys and amazing adventures. And again, happy birthday, Brian.
Thank you very much, Hercules. Good night.
Good night. And again, I am baffled by the buttons. Let's see. Nope, that's not it. Let me see what they changed about the buttons.